Living for a week on $17 was a special talent. Fortunately, we still had some groceries left. Nothing fancy. Soup, sandwiches, Kraft dinner, and cereal for breakfast. A care package of bran muffins from Mrs. Peach arrived by mail, and we were really thrilled until we found out that Ferguson's mom bakes hockey pucks. It was agreed, even by the Peach, that only after going through the garbage would we resort to the muffins. Every penny counted. We had enough cash to send Ferguson on the bus to and from Stupid Plastics Unlimited, but if Don or I got jobs out of the neighborhood, we would have to walk. As for entertainment, forget it. We were still stinging from the big ripoff, especially Don. Things always went perfectly for Mr. Wonderful, so he had no experience in dealing with anything less than sunshine and roses. He seemed more bewildered than upset. Plotnik had overloaded his brain. "I still don't see how he could get away with it," Don seethed. "Surely there must be some board of review or something that we can complain to." "I'm sure there is," I said. "We'd probably win too. But by the time all the technicalities got straightened out, it would be months, maybe years. And Joe would be back from Europe, kicked out of his apartment, and we'd be wrapped in plastic sitting in the supermarket with the rest of the hamburger." "Well, maybe," said Don, "but it stinks. I mean, things aren't supposed to go this way." It didn't make us feel any better when an envelope arrived from my brother in England. Inside was a snapshot of Joe carrying a gorgeous blonde through the surf. On the back was scribbled, "Me and Daphne at Brighton. P.S. I forgot to warn you, if you break something in Plotnik's building, don't tell him, or he'll fix the whole place up and try to make you pay for it." We cursed the mail. Why couldn't these words of wisdom have gotten here $319 ago? On Monday morning, I was taking a shower, trying to conserve soap, when, through the shower curtain, I thought I spotted movement out on the fire escape. Shocked, I turned off the water, wrapped myself in a towel, and jumped out of the tub. I watched in horror as the air conditioner was lifted out of the window and a hairy arm as big as a tree trunk reached in and flipped the lock. My mind screamed, "Help, police," but nothing came out of my mouth. I stood there cowering as the window was raised and in climbed the biggest guy I'd ever seen. He looked at me with blazing eyes and roared, "You've got 5 seconds to get out of Joe Cardone's apartment! After that, you're gonna start having bad luck!" That's when I recognized the intruder. Semi-relief flooded over me. It wasn't a burglar, it was worse. Whenever Joe wanted to scare me, he'd tell stories about his craziest friend, a guy named Root Beer Racinette, who was half man, half Bigfoot. I'd always figured he was exaggerating until this very moment. The person standing before me was almost 7 feet tall, and his long black hair and beard looked as though he'd just stuck his finger in an electric socket. There was no doubt about it. The man, the myth, the legend, Root Beer Racinette, had surfaced in our toilet. "I'm Jason," I said in a small voice, "Joe's brother. Are you, For some reason I had trouble making my mouth form the word. "Root beer?" "Jason, yeah!" He gave me a friendly slap on the back that sent me reeling into the wall. "Thought someone had broken into Joe's place. It's not that hard, you know." I watched him replace the air conditioner with one hand. It had taken all 3 of us 45 minutes to get it from the closet to the window. "Well, I was kind of scared at first," I said with a nervous laugh. "We've had some crime in the neighborhood. Joe's car's been stolen." Root Beer looked shocked. "Already? I just parked it 2 minutes ago!" I looked out to Pitt Street. There, in front of the deli, was the Camaro, gleaming like an aerodynamic black hole. You had it? Sure, Joe and I are really tight. We share everything. I grabbed the Camaro and took a spin down to Florida. I had some business to take care of with this guy, and wouldn't you know it, he had bad luck. But we had the keys. Root Beer shrugged. Oh yeah, keys, never use them. I glanced at the window. I can see that. Root Beer reached into his shirt, actually a voluminous poncho, and pulled out a paper grocery bag. Where should I put my luggage? Life did this to you every so often. Here I was, so happy that the car wasn't stolen after all, I could have danced a jig, except my towel would have fallen off. How long did I get to enjoy this bliss? Less than 30 seconds before being hit with the news that this ponchoed grizzly bear was moving in. I cleared my throat very carefully. How long are you planning to stay? Root Beer stuck his great ugly face into his paper bag and counted up his underwear. 4 pairs! Yep, I'm here from now on! At that moment, there was an insistent knocking at the door. Quit talking to yourself, Jason, and let me into the can before I bust a gut! Root Beer flung the door wide, and Don jumped back with a gasp. Even the unflappable Peach was staring at me as if to say, you went into the bathroom to take a shower and this came up out of the drain, right? Ferguson, Don, this is Root Beer Rastinet. He brought the car back, isn't that great? Root Beer chased down my 2 roommates and awarded each one the how do you do wallop. Any pals of Joe Cardone's brother are pals of mine. Poor Ferguson and Don alternated between terror and confusion. He's Joe's friend, I supplied. I'm here to make a change, Root Beer announced. My old job really took a lot out of me. What line of work are you thinking of getting into? Asked Don with a quiver in his voice. None, said Root Beer honestly. See, that was my whole problem. The same job, day in and day out. No excitement, no variety. What did you do? Ventured the Peach. I wrestled alligators. Don't try it. What a grind. The 3 of us all agreed to take Root Beer's advice. Our new roommate yawned and stretched, which was a sight I won't attempt to describe. Well, I'm gonna crash for a while, he said, then threw himself down on the floor and fell asleep instantly. There was a second's pause, and then a mad scramble for the bathroom. The idea was that the first guy washed and dressed would be the first guy out of the apartment. Don beat us there, slammed the door, and locked it. No fair, said Ferguson. You said you wanted to sleep in this morning. I've got to go to work, came Don's voice through the door. You don't have a job, I retorted. I didn't either, but who was thinking straight? Yeah, but I have to find one. I want to start pounding the pavement at 9 sharp. He's just scared, I told Ferguson. I don't blame him. Root Beer slumbered on, his poncho draped around him like a blanket. It was a patchwork affair, made of what looked like old flannel pajamas, and it was big enough for 2 of him. I laughed nervously. What a concept! 2 of Root Beer would get its own area code from the phone company. 3 of Root Beer? Well, I don't know much about physics, but 3 might have so much gravitational attraction that his atoms would collapse in on each other and he would achieve critical mass, a tiny neutron star in a poncho. The summer was heating up, but even as the mercury crawled past 95 degrees, Don and I stayed away from the nice, cool apartment. We bought a Toronto Star, found a reasonably shaded park bench on which to begin our job search. We never got to the want ads. En route to the classifieds, a headline caught my eye. Alligator Tycoon's BMW thrown in Everglades. Root Beer, I blurted out. Don jumped. Where? This article, it's him! The piece stated that the disgruntled employee suspected of being the culprit was an alligator wrestler fired for being too hard on the alligators. I don't like this, Jason, quavered Don. Maybe Joe could kick him out. Call Europe. I had to laugh. What am I supposed to say? Hello, Europe, could you please put Joe Cardone on? And even if I could reach Joe, then what? He's the idiot who invited Root Beer over in the first place. He probably said, come anytime, and forgot to mention he'd be gone all summer. Knowing Joe, he gave the guy carte blanche. The place, the car, us. Let's hope Root Beer doesn't believe in human sacrifice. Don slapped the paper. Look what he does when he's disgruntled. Can you imagine when he gets really mad? It's bound to happen. Nobody stays gruntled forever. Look, I said, pretty soon we'll both be working, so we'll all be hanging around the place at night. Root Beer will be doing his own thing and we'll hardly ever see him. For all we know, he might pick up and blow off to Florida or somewhere again. Joe always talked about Root Beer being flaky, so don't worry about it. I sounded confident, but that still didn't give me the guts to go into the apartment. For lunch, we split a small order of McDonald's French fries, all we could afford on $5.83 per person per week. Between the hunger and the heat, we were limp as rags by the time Ferguson stepped off the Bathurst streetcar and found us sitting on the front stoop. Just enjoying the sunshine, Don told him. Oh, sure, said the Peach, and it's got nothing to do with the fact that you don't want any one-on-one with our guest, Mr. Rassinet. There's safety in numbers, and we had as many as we were going to get. I'd have felt a little more secure being backed up by a crack platoon of Marines, but there are times you just have to go for it. Besides, if we didn't eat something, Don and I were going to faint. Let's get up in there, I'm starved. We paused to watch Plotnik burst out and net a hubcap from a speeding station wagon. I waved, nice catch! Waddling back to the deli, our landlord scowled at me. Mr. Cardone, I don't want to mix in, but I think you should know there's a gorilla in your apartment. Remember, no pets! Come on, Mr. Plotnik, I said, you know it's a person. That's your opinion, said Plotnik. Another house guest? I nodded. What a host you are, Mr. Cardone! Just so you know, when I open my hotel, I'm going to start charging by the head. We ran upstairs, but paused before opening the door. I was in agony. What if that lunatic had trashed the apartment? I clicked the lock, and we went inside. The place looked exactly as it had been when we left this morning, only Root Beer had picked himself up off the floor and was seated on the couch watching television. He looked up at us. Hi, I hope you don't mind, I ate your food. No problem, I said. There's plenty for everybody. Ravenously, I went to the kitchen to investigate the prospects for dinner. That's when I found out that when Root Beer Rassinet eats your food, he really eats your food. All of it, right down to the last cracker. Even Mrs. Peach's brand hockey pucks were gone. We were bare to the walls. Root Beer? I said cautiously. What happened to all the food? I ate it. That's okay, isn't it? But we had 8 cans of soup, I protested. Root Beer rubbed an area at the vague epicenter of the poncho. I love soup. I began opening cupboards at random. Even the salt and pepper shakers were empty. Don and Ferguson were in the kitchen too now, searching. What about the cereal? Lamented Don, who had gotten the smaller half of our lunch fries. We had Snappy Wappies! We had Toasty Flakes! Breakfast is the most important meal of the day, said Root Beer. He stood up, his face all concerned. Hey, this isn't a problem, is it? Well, I said, choosing my words carefully, I didn't want to insult Root Beer and end up with the alligator guy's BMW at the bottom of the Everglades. You kinda caught us on a bad week. The fact is, we're all flat broke. We were depending on this food to last till payday. Okay, said Root Beer cheerfully. I'm broke too. I guess I'll have to work. Ferguson risked a complaint. Your getting a job won't help us now. We have no dinner.
Yeah, I feel bad about that, said Root Beer. You guys are gonna have to hang out for a couple of hours.
A terrible hush fell over the three of us. What kind of job, lasting a couple of hours and yielding instant cash, could Root Beer be talking about? Didn't make us any more confident than when he said we had to wait till it got dark. But how could we face him and say, Root Beer, which bank are you going to knock off? Because on the chance, however slight, that his plans were lawful and honest, he'd be pretty insulted. And even though we'd only just met him this morning, we'd already learned that people who insulted Root Beer Racinette invariably ran into bad luck.
I'll need one of you to come with me,
Root Beer announced when the sun began to set. That did it. Don suddenly developed a terrible headache, and Ferguson locked himself in the bathroom, obviously with no intention of coming out. I could have made a fuss, demanded we draw straws or flip a coin, but I didn't. It was Joe's apartment and Joe's friend, and the job of going with him fell to me. Just before 9, Root Beer declared the time was right. I followed him, my empty stomach rumbling ominously, as though it knew my next meal was going to be served at Shea Penitentiary on a tin plate. We got into the car, and Root Beer drove at 100 miles an hour to an area of town even seedier than Pitt Street, if such a thing was possible. We parked in front of an old building that was in the process of either being torn down or collapsing, and Root Beer started rummaging through the pile of debris, coming up with a long, rotted 2x4. This he carried over his shoulder, like a soldier with an 8-foot rifle, to a dumpy establishment on the corner with a neon sign that just read, "Bar."
"Wait here,"
he told me, and then disappeared inside. About 5 seconds later, a booming voice bellowed,
$20 says you can't hurt me with a shot in the stomach with this 2x4!
I almost died. There was a roar of enthusiasm from the bar, and out onto the street poured 18 people, Root Beer in the lead. He collected $20 each from the participants, who were in a spirited argument over who would get to swing the heavy piece of lumber. He handed the money to me.
"Hold this."
"For God's sake, Root Beer," I quavered, "you can't go through with this, you'll get killed! Not to mention if we lose, we can't pay off 5 cents of that money!"
"Not so loud," whispered Root Beer. "People don't like to bet when they know there's no money to pay them. They get mad."
By this time, the 18 were taking practice with swings with the 2x4. The whistle of the board through the air was making me queasy, and I watched in a daze as the group elected some guy who had once tried out for the Yankees to take the home run swing. There are times in your life when you see something so totally amazing, you forget how scared you are and try to make the moment last because you know you'll never see anything quite like it again. Whenever I think back to that night, I always see it in super slow-mo, although it was really over in a flash. Root Beer stood there like a mighty redwood, feet planted, stomach tense under his poncho. The almost Yankee swung for the upper deck. The board slammed into Root Beer's abdomen with a thump that echoed through the streets. The wood splintered. I felt the sidewalk lurch, but Root Beer didn't even move. He didn't even flinch. He started to whistle and glanced around the circle of shocked faces.
"Nice meeting everybody. We better get going. Bye!"
The three of us, me, Root Beer, and the money, climbed back into the Camaro. Root Beer indicated that I should drive, and I was overjoyed to take off out of there. Neither of us spoke, so I figured I had to break the ice. "Root Beer, that was amazing!" "Ah!" he shrieked in a bone-chilling voice that nearly put me up a telephone pole. "Are you okay?"
"Ah!"
Now I knew why he needed one of us to go with him. Somebody had to do the driving while he screamed. He indicated by sign language that I should pull in at a grocery store, and he sent me in to shop while he remained in the car howling. Even in the frozen food section over the Muzak, I could hear the echoes from the parking lot. About 10 minutes later, Root Beer joined me, cheerful as ever, as though he hadn't been in the throes of agony 30 seconds ago. We bought $150 worth of groceries, enough to last even Root Beer until Friday. "What happened?" asked Don when we got back. A 5-hour explanation formed in my head. "Nothing," I said. They wouldn't have believed me anyway. The next morning, we awoke to find Root Beer Racinette lying dead on the floor. We didn't even know at first because he always flopped down to sleep wherever he happened to be standing. So we tiptoed around, careful not to wake him as we showered and dressed. "At least he isn't snoring," whispered Don. "Did you hear him last night? I thought the building was gonna come down. The phantom was knocking on the wall." The Peach bent over Root Beer. "The reason he isn't snoring," he said, his face pale, "is because he isn't breathing." We freaked out. The three of us crawled all over Root Beer, poking, prodding, feeling for a heartbeat that wasn't there. He was dead as a mackerel. I admit it. I burst into tears, blubbering out the whole story of last night. "It's all my fault," I wailed. "If I'd stopped him, he'd be alive now. Joe would have stopped him, but I let him do it. And now he's dead because of internal injuries or something. What are we gonna do?" Ferguson shook his head. "Call the police, of course." "No police!" came a howl through the ventilation duct. This was followed by pounding footsteps on the stairs, and then Plotnik burst onto the scene, red-faced and wild-eyed. He took in the situation with a horrified gasp. "Oi, how could this happen to me?" "To you?" I shrieked. "A guy is dead!" Okay, said Plotnik. "We're in this together. We need to be reasonable. Let me think." His brow furrowed and unfurrowed. "All right, take him out, throw him into a field, hell with him, God rest his soul." I was horrified. "We can't do that!" "Yes, we can. I don't want hassles over this. First the police, and the coroner, then the reporters. No, not in my building." "Look, Mr. Plotnik," I argued, "if we throw a body in the field, the police will suspect foul play. When they trace it, they won't just hassle us, they'll toss us in jail." "I'm an old man," Plotnik shrugged. "Maybe by the time they'll trace it, I'll be dead." But by then, the Peach had already dialed 911 and the police were on their way. The next hour was a nightmare. I must have told the story about the 2x4 20 times, first to the police, then to the reporters, then to our fellow tenants. Plotnik went to lie down, and the officers, seeing an elderly man obviously overcome by emotion, were brief and kind. They assumed that he was upset over the untimely death, never guessing that his collapse was due to their own presence. I was destroyed as I watched the uniform attendants carry Root Beer's body on 2 stretchers out to the ambulance. Don Ferguson and I followed like an honor guard. God's grandmother sobbed uncontrollably, and Wayne Gretzky's sister dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. The assassin removed his hat respectfully. Even Plotnik joined us, coming out of hiding since the law was gone. The back doors of the ambulance swallowed Root Beer up, and the vehicle pulled away slowly. There was no siren, no rush. This was Root Beer's last ride. The ambulance got as far as the corner. Then the white reverse lights came on, and it backed up, coming to a stop in front of the deli. The door swung wide, and out stepped Root Beer Racinette, fresh as a daisy. "He's alive!" cried Don. The 3 of us made a run at Root Beer, catching him in a joyful embrace, blubbering incoherently. Plotnik launched into a tantrum, because the police had come to his building for nothing. Our neighbors cheered, and the two attendants craned their necks out the ambulance windows to stare at the man they had pronounced dead just a few minutes earlier. Root Beer stretched expansively.
What's everyone so excited about?
I couldn't believe it. You were dead, Root Beer! No heartbeat or anything! And I figured because of that hit you took last night. My voice trailed off. The ex-corpse looked mystified for a second, then laughed airily.
I'm in the Manchurian bush meditation. I learned it from a guru in Buffalo. Your heart slows down to 5 or 6 beats a minute, which is probably what fooled you guys. It was an honest mistake. I'll give you an honest mistake, you degenerate! Raged Plotnik. If they put you on the ground before you wake up, that's an honest mistake!
Root Beer shrugged.
No hard feelings.
The ambulance attendants had hard feelings. They left a lot of rubber on Pitt Street before squealing away onto Bathurst. Plotnik had hard feelings. He stormed back into the deli and sulked behind the counter, sharpening his meat fork. The three of us had hard feelings too, but to the bizarre giant in the poncho, we didn't dare say anything.